So you're like a child that's wandered to the movie theater halfway through and you're wondering what's going on. This is Donny Cast on the 27th of June, 2022. And let's get on with that shotgun blast of news to your stupid normie face. So to start off, if you weren't aware, the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade, which is the Supreme Court decision that made abortions federally a right, and all this did was return it to the states. I got done reading it last night. I'm going to try and put together a video on certain other issues involving primarily this fine American by the name of Clarence Thomas, who's been much maligned lately. But moving forward, the top story of the weekend is going to be that there were quote unquote protests that were going on. So this story by a Sebastian Murdoch, Yahoo News through the Huffington Post. This is good old Sebastian's Twitter page. Um, you can kind of get an idea of what he's all about by his retweets. Smartly enough, he doesn't say anything of his own accord. He just retweets certain things on Alex Jones or Ocasio-Cortez or whoever this moron is. Anyway, that's where he comes from. So in his piece where he wrote pro-choice protesters attacked and threatened as Roe demonstrations continue into day two. I might call them pro-choice rioters. That would be how I would frame them. It's kind of interesting, the framing. I saw the video of these protesters descending on Phoenix, the Arizona Capitol, trying to kick in one of the doors. He actually writes in here because he's a disingenuous schmuck that the building showed protesters with signs shouting outside the doors of the state capitol and banging on the glass doors. But the key distinction is not attempting to enter, because as a reporter he would know what their intent was. If they were able to kick those doors in, he would know that they were only mostly peacefully trying to kick the doors open and bang on the glass, but they weren't attempting to enter because they were never able to get the opportunity to enter. After being tear gassed, protesters moved downtown and were tear gassed again by police officers after a monument was allegedly vandalized. You're not a reporter. You're not a reporter, Mr. Sebastian Murdoch. You're a propagandist, and you're a piece of shit. So anyway, he also reports on there was somebody who drove into a group of demonstrators in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I didn't hear anything about that. There's also stuff that happened in downtown LA, including former that stupid TV show in the 80s and 90s. That anyway, some dumbass actress got knocked down by LAPD, and they made some big deal. I don't fucking care. You know what? Like, if you don't understand what's going on, then you probably shouldn't have an opinion. And if you're out there demonstrating and you're causing damage, you're not a demonstrator. You're a rioter. I don't care. So moving forward, Michigan's top lawyer warns same-sex marriage now under threat, and this is by Keith Naughton. I don't think I have this guy pulled up today. I didn't go look him up. I didn't really care. I didn't really even read this article too much. It's opinion pieces. I don't really care about opinion pieces most of the time. But the Attorney General, Dana Nessel, a pioneer in the U.S. fight for marriage equality, because she's gay. That's what she does. She's a gay lawyer that checked some boxes and fell into the Attorney General position of Michigan. She warns same-sex marriage is now under threat, and she's right. It is, if you take what Clarence Thomas said, because what Clarence Thomas said was Roe established bad law, and that means the bad law that was built upon Roe probably needs to be reevaluated because it's bad law. Not his opinion on same-sex marriage, because there's another story that I probably didn't get into involving everybody's angry uncle Samuel L. Jackson deciding to call Clarence Thomas Uncle Clarence and asking about his marriage to a white woman. The idea is that all Clarence Thomas said was that Roe established bad law. It's substance due process, which he says is an oxymoron and is not enumerated under the 14th Amendment. And therefore, everything that was built upon substantive due process isn't real and therefore should be reevaluated because it's bad law and it's only going to cause more bad law. That's what Clarence Thomas said. So this is a little disingenuous because he is saying he's going to go after same-sex marriage, but it's not saying why, because everybody should be like, if it's bad law, it should be fixed. That's part of the problem with Roe. It's even in the Supreme Court case, it doesn't actually talk about whether or not it's the court's opinion on abortion too heavily. It does talk about the history and traditions of the court and in regards to abortion, but it doesn't talk about the morality of abortion. It actually goes about saying why this abortion stuff, the morality behind it is so hyper partisan, and they're trying not to touch that with a stick. Now, we all know that everybody's biased, but that was the intent of the ruling. So this is burying a whole bunch of stuff. So the fact that Michigan's attorney general would stand up and say, yes, I am more concerned with protecting bad law because I want to keep same-sex marriage around. It just goes to show the type of people that we have in the positions of power that we do. So anyway, moving forward, with more absolute ding dongs, we have the Attorney General of the United States, Merrick Garland, saying that he's going to basically stomp on the states' rights and you weaponize the Food and Drug Administration because, if they say that you can use a drug for abortions, then he's going to make sure that the states have to do that. And that's a little dicey because that's going to end up coming into states' rights really hard and really hard and heavy, or hot and heavy, I should say. Excuse me as I stutter. So in this case with Merrick Garland, it's like, yeah, you may be overstepping your ability to do what you're doing because you don't care. It's more important to do what you think is subjectively correct, the spirit of the law, instead of actually the letter of the law. So we'll get into some of these things later on, but again, when the states want to basically thumb their nose at the federal government and say, we have no rule of law, we have no history and tradition because it doesn't matter. And that's what's going on here, where Merrick Garland's like, well, I'm going to weaponize this law that I really shouldn't be weaponizing in order to tell you that if you want to use a drug that the state of Mississippi is going to rule now being illegal, well, they don't have the right to rule it illegal because the FDA says, like, you can do it. That's not good law. That's not good power structures within your country. So let's see. As we go on to more Merrick Garland stuff, because Merrick Garland is kind of weaponized the DOJ. So we have this raw story by Travis Getz. He's another guy that I decided that I was going to pull up. And when I put his name into the good old Google machine, I pulled up a Project Veritas story, Retraction 359, Travis Getz raw story, because it says raw stories. Travis Getz erroneously asserts that a federal judge approved the appointment of a special master in the FBI versus Project Veritas case at the request of the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press. He had to correct the article to affirm that it was, in fact, Veritas who requested the special master and was granted by one judge. Now, Project Veritas is kind of a activist organization on the right side. I will say they're full send reporters or journalists, but it is interesting that they would have targeted this guy for being disingenuous and won, where he had to retract something that he said. So moving forward, who good old Travis Getz is, because it's always good to know who we're dealing with when we're trying to pull up a story. We have another situation where I'm going to pull up someone's Twitter. Twitter is a good place to go to be a moron. So I'm pretty sure this is the Travis Getz, because it says at Wirecamp, but it also has raw story down here. And we just have certain stories that he's decided that he's going to put up there. For instance, Raw Story has this signals in urgency. January 6th committee announced a surprising hearing on Tuesday Um, his own personal thoughts. I've had dreams. I don't really care, but he's got a story up of Sotomayor, left wing activist, Supreme Court justice that she is. Supreme Court sides with praying football coach, criticized by appeals court for pushing deceitful narrative about the case. I mean, this is the type of guy that we have going out there, really kind of skirting the line. This isn't my tweet. This is just the first paragraph of Groth's opinion. In the praying coach case is refuted for the third paragraph by Groth's opinion in the praying coach case. I don't care, but this is the type of guy that you're getting who's pretending to be a reporter, and he's not, because when we pull up his story, it's raw story. It doesn't say it's an editorial by any stretch of the imagination. It's not an opinion piece. This is a story. It's newly revealed detail in Mo Brooks' pardon request could provide evidence for criminal case. I actually think that this is I think they changed the title for the article, the headline, because I think it was actually talking about the possibility that this would show uh the I'm a little shocked. I think it actually said earlier a different headline that had to do with showing the guilt of Mo Brooks because he did request the pardon request. That's interesting. Newly revealed details in Mo Brooks' pardon request could provide evidence for criminal. That's not what it said earlier. I'm fairly certain that's not what it said when I saw this case earlier. We go down the bottom, and you can see there's pretty much nothing that it talks about. It shows that Mo Brooks knew that the writing was on the wall that the Trump administration was not going to retain the presidency, and the incoming political party was coming in, the Biden administration, and his desire for a broad blanket immunity is a pretty good indication that he knew that the political witch hunt was inevitable, and he just wanted to cover his bases from being able to be witch hunted. Good old partisan, what's his moron face, Travis Geddes. He decided to throw in there objections filed in those two states came after the Capitol attack, and when viewed alongside efforts by Trump attorney to push senators to continue objecting to Biden's certification, suggest additional corrupt intent. How? You just said it suggests additional corrupt intent. How? What corrupt intent? Because if someone is just doing something that's within the means of the law because they feel a particular thing has occurred and they have active legal remedies to pursue it, then there's no criminal intent or corrupt intent behind it. You have to prove someone was corrupt, or you're just throwing things out there that are eventually going to be retracted. Because in this case, I read this article going, why did this guy ask for a pardon? And it's like, well, it's pretty clear that they all knew that the next administration was coming in, and they wanted to make sure they had their butts covered because there was going to be some type of show trial at a certain point, and some grandstanding, and there is. That's what the January 6th committee going on right now is. So in this case, with good old Mo Brooks and him asking to be pardoned, it doesn't show corrupt intent. It shows fucking paranoia, and for good reason. So let's see. Moving on from there, we have another Supreme Court case. The Supreme Court released more cases today on Monday. One of the one that came out was Supreme Court sides with coach over prayers on the 50-yard line, and this goes back to the main case that they released. I think it was on Friday, involving whether or not the state could give subsidies to individuals to take their money and use it as tuition in private religious schools. And just for clarification, the separation of church and state that we have in the United States has to do with the state will take no position in forming a preferred religion. So a political party or a religion would be seen in the same eyes to the government as these private institutions. In the case of religion, if it's going to treat religion one way, or any religion a particular way, it has to treat all religions that particular way. Or in the case of schools, it has to be neutral to whether or not you're having a left-wing drag queen story hour type of curriculum at your communist factory. It has to treat that school the same way it would to an ultra orthodox Christian school. It would treat them the same way, just as it would treat a mild Islamic school the same way it would treat a hardcore Jewish school. It would just treat them all the same because you're giving out your money and you're not supposed to be showing bias. In this case, the Supreme Court ruled on Monday that a high school football coach had a constitutional right to pray at the 50-yard line after his team's games. And I point out that this should have been a 9-0 ruling, but we literally have two functional or retarded justices that don't understand the Constitution. You know, this is how equal this is. How is it equal when you discriminate against religion? This comes, you're not supposed to discriminate. If you're discriminating against religion, period, you're still discriminating. That is not what church and state means, right? So in this case, this gentleman was doing what he did, and the votes came out 6-3. He was not trying to force his religious views on anybody. He was taking his own personal time when he was allowed to do things and praying. Part of this came about, I guess, from the idea that some of his, I think it was football players, thought that they would be treated differently if they did not carry on with the praying. And this just becomes an issue. Like if you can still have church in your activities, that is not what separation of church and state is, and you can see by how they tried to parse this today. The courts continued his assaults on church and state separation by falsely describing coercive prayer as personal and stopping public schools from protecting their students' religious freedom. She said it in a statement, and no, that's not the case. In this case, it is an assault on church and state separation by having the state assault the church. The state treating all religions equally is the opposite of the assault on the separation of church and state. And it just goes to show that at least 3 of the justices had no fucking clue, and whoever wrote this article is partially, not well informed himself. I'm trying not to cuss and be a despicable human being. My co-host told me that I use words that are not particularly good. So anyway, moving on to our next story, our last in our law and the Supreme Court stuff. So the New York Supreme Court strikes down law allowing non-citizens to vote. This was another, really ridiculous thing where the New York City decided they were going to have municipal elections and have non-citizens vote in there. And then the Supreme Court just came down and said, it's part of the New York State Constitution that you have to be a citizen in order to vote. It's too easy. Again, if you don't like the law, change the law. In the meantime, abide by the law, because if you just go throwing out laws that you decide are uncouth in some regard, then someone else has the same right to sit there and say, well, I don't agree with this law and I'm just going to disregard it. You have no functioning culture, you have no rule of law, and it just becomes anarchy. So I'm a little shocked that the New York Supreme Court would actually do what they were fucking supposed to do in a very obvious manner, and uphold that citizens have more rights than non-citizens. I don't realize how that's controversial at this point. So we're going into the economy, and this is a Fortune magazine article that just says stagnation is here, or stagflation is here, even if recession isn't officially here yet. Top economists, some Muslim guy with Moham El Iran, I don't know, whatever. I don't know who this guy is. I don't care. The main thing that I'm interested in that, yes, stagflation is a stagnant economy with a inflation. The biggest thing is this just goes along that we're already in this recession that's going around, economic downturn. It's probably, I'm going to say, going to be one of the worst ones that we've had. Rumor has it inflation is already in the double digits. It just hasn't been announced yet officially. And those numbers are, by some estimates, going to raise higher than the Carter administration era inflation numbers. So, buckle your seatbelts, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go. That if you live in California, you should be leaving. Millions of California taxpayers get inflation relief payments. This is fucking function. I don't understand how this guy who's the front runner for the California, or for the the 2024 Democrat presidential nominee, he's a moron. Gavin Newsom he's a moron. And in this case, he's going to be giving taxpayers back some type of direct payments up to $1,000 and $1,050. Um, Again, like, where's the money coming from? Because you're either returning taxpayer dollars to the individual, which is already, I want to punch myself in the face, or you're returning inflated dollars that the Fed has printed out and put into the wild that you have collected, and then you are pumping out, which will not help inflation. Either way, this will not help inflation because you're just you're putting more air into the balloon. Because this money just appears from the ether. This is what is driving inflation. And it is essentially a novelty act that they are putting on to try and make stupid people feel like that the state is doing something. They're buying votes because the 2022 midterms were going to be a fucking bloodbath. And the other thing to put into effect that they're going to suspend the state sales tax on diesel, because everybody drives those diesel mobiles. Just so they show you how much they care about you, they're going to give you the tax back on the car that you're not driving because fuck you, right? And additional funds to help people pay their rent and a utility bill, which is, again, how's that going to help inflation? Fuck you. It's just going to make stupid people go, oh, thank you, government, for giving me my fucking money back, or thank you, government, for giving me that long-term loan on my kids' futures because fuck you, inflation. Let's see. Moving on from California is a shithole to more California is a shithole. So as we point out that nope, we already did that one. Sorry. California is still a shithole. In this case, we have it costs $22,648 and requires 11 agencies to start a restaurant in San Francisco. San Francisco, the abysmal communist hellhole that it is. In this case, this is a article from Zero Hedge talking about, in a report called Barriers to Business, the Institute for Justice analyzed 20 cities for how easy it is to open 5 different types of business to cover a range of those businesses, including restaurants, retail, bookstore, food truck, barbershop, and home-based tutoring businesses. Entrepreneurs want to start a restaurant, for example, have 13 different fees totaling $5,300 on average across 20 cities. In San Francisco, those fees reach $22,000. And if you're wondering out there in the cheap seats, this becomes inordinately hard on the lower classes because A, they don't have the money, and B, even if they decide that they want to be they want to be entrepreneurial in some way, shape, or form, they are not aware that they are bringing the eye of Sauron upon them from the state by doing things without jumping through the hoops of all this regulation and taxation that are going on. And when they cross that eye and they bring the whole crushing weight of the federal government's monopoly on force upon them, what are they supposed to do? Like, I didn't know that I was supposed to go spend $22,000 and 11 different agencies to start up a food truck or a barbershop out of my garage. Like, this is fucking retarded. Let alone anybody that would whatever intellectually limited individual would want to go to San Francisco to attempt to open a business up at this point. They have to have $22,000 on top of that other money to attempt to open a business and know that they're going to jump through hoops. One of the other things that the article points out is that there is no one-stop shop to open a business. So you're jumping around to bureaucracy with people that don't know what they're doing, hoping that you're going in the right direction to get everything done. You check all the boxes, dot all those I's, cross all those T's, and no one can actually fucking help you to let you know that you're moving in the right direction, let alone in a dystopian hellhole like fucking California, where they're actively trying to choke everyone to death because they're idiots. And let's see. So move out of California if you haven't done so. We're going to go to Europe, which is also another dystopian fucking communist hellhole in the making. European fund managers set to go all in on ESG. If you're unaware what ESG is, as I got to blur that out later on, ESG is the environmental social governance score that are being put out by asset management companies like BlackRock, that are basically saying, we don't care if your company is profitable, has a functioning business model, or has long-term economic stability. What we care about is if you're trying to jump through the hoops of pretending like you care about the economy, or excuse me, the environment. You care about social justice. You care about like certain ideological concepts like Marxism or socialism. That's what we care about, and therefore we're going to artificially manipulate your stock price to reflect the fact that we like you more than we like the guy that's just trying to operate a functional business. And according to this, European fund managers are just, that's how they're going to evaluate stocks. That's how they're going to evaluate business. That's going to be how they evaluate portfolios coming down the line. And this is your bubble. So with the economic downturn, they don't give a shit about how things are functioning. What they give a shit is about virtue signal and social credit scores. And it's almost like it's on cue that I would bring up social credit scores, because zero COVID has many in China dreaming of leaving. I had to hunt down this article. I saw it on other social media. In this case, there is a new concept going on in China, which is like, no longer I want to grind. It is no longer I want to do as little as possible. It is I need to get the fuck out of China. China is so bad that they're like the new policy, or I shouldn't even say the new policy, the new feeling among the middle class is, I need to leave. We need to get out of China because China is not going to get any better. There's a word called like Rune Z, I believe it is. A joke often seen online that stressed out urbanites have three opinions. They can continue to struggle in the rat race of Chinese society, making little progress in an approach known as Niwan, or involution, the process of turning inward or self-defeating competition with others. Others may choose to opt out of life of striving and instead tang ping, or lie flat, do as little as possible. Now those with means can choose to immigrate or run. So that's the new term that's going on in China. It's, if I can find it, I probably won't be able to find it. It's like Runzi, something like that. It's just the new model for the Chinese middle class is, I need to get the fuck out of China. I need to go, because it's only going to get economically worse. It's going to get socially worse. There's no upside to this. And after how the zero tolerance that they had on COVID, it's becoming clear that you can't play the game because the game is rigged. That's in China. And they're manipulating the economy there. So anyway, that's just moving on from that. My note on this is, even eventually the frog realizes it's getting boiled alive and has to hop out of the pot. So let's see. Moving on to, this is just an odd little story. I don't exactly know what to make of it, because this is all over today. More than 1 million voters switch registration to GOP as suburbs break from Biden. And again, this is moving towards the idea that the 2022 midterms are going to be a bloodbath for the Democrats. I actually have an opinion piece that I didn't think there was a lot of substance to, but there was pointing out that like the 2022 midterms, it was written by a Democrat talking about the 2022 midterms may be an extinction level event. The problem with stories like this is it tends to have the opposite effect on people, because the people in the GOP may be less likely to show up because they're like, the bloodbath is here. On the other hand, it can rally the base of the Democrats and say, hey, if we don't get out there, it's going to be a bloodbath. So the exact purpose behind the story, how they were able to track, the million people that are switching sides. Roughly 1.7 million Americans have changed their party affiliate over the past 12 months. 2/3 of those have gone to the GOP, while 630,000 have switched to the Democratic Party, according to the report. While not the final nail in the coffin for the Democrats, The voter trend is yet another indicator that Republicans stand to make large gains in Congress and state governments across the country in November. I don't think it's going to be necessarily state and federal governments that are going to see the biggest boon out of this. I think it's going to be local governments that are going to see the biggest boon, because in some cases you don't even have people running off party affiliations going on. So you might actually have a lot more individual investment on local politics this time around. So that means that like checking people's fucking Twitter accounts may be very important when it comes to who I'm going to vote for in small, miserable Missouri. That's probably more in line with what's going on. It's on a larger federal macro level. The only things that really matter are going to be how shall we put this, areas that still have fortified elections that are purple are the only ones that matter, because blue areas are going to double down because of ruling like on the Roe case, and areas that are red are going to be much more red. It's the purple areas, obviously the battleground areas, that are going to matter. If they're fortified, they're going to go blue. If they're not fortified, they're probably going to go red, and you're just going to see that bigger dividing line in the country that's going to go on. All those areas that are purple, though, are going that don't have certain obstacles to jump through are going to go very red. That means your school boards are going to jump, your city councils are going to jump, and anybody that's talking about any of this social type justicey, social credit score type nonsense, this ESG nonsense, are probably going to be the guys that lose out when it comes to the upcoming 2022 midterms and beyond. So interesting story. Stop poking Russia. You have Russia troops killed up to 80 Polish fighters in Ukraine. Why were there 80 Polish fighters in Ukraine? Modern warfare has a lot of mercenaries involved. It's proxy wars between nations. So Poland hates Russia. They send 80 mercenaries there, irregular soldiers, spooks you can almost call them, and they're in Russia, and Russia hit. I was going to say nuke them. They didn't nuke them. They did hit them with a missile strike. And this is also part of what some of the rumor mills about Putin being rushed back to the Kremlin a couple days ago involved them hitting these potential mercs, these Polish mercs. So it's just interesting stuff going on in Ukraine, as we have conflicting narratives about what is actually going on there. Let's see, moving forward, in the Epstein didn't kill himself saga. So this weekend it was reported that Ghislaine Maxwell, who's about to be sentenced, reported jail staff threatened her safety, prompting suicide watch. So when she gets Clintoned here very shortly, yeah, believe what you want to believe. So anyway, that's about it for the 27th of June. If you're still hanging around, yeah, do that thing, and maybe we'll catch you some other time.